Straight Talk Vermont with Linda Joy Sullivan, and our featured guest today is the infamous Senator
Infamous.
Kesha and Hinsdale. Welcome. I am so pleased to have you on with us. I just loved always working with you for all those years, and you have such a phenomenal reputation, and you are such a hard worker there for the Vermonters. And what I always like about working with you is that you put your neutral hat on and you go in there and you assess the evidence. And then you come back and put your passion to the neutral hat, which you're allowed to do. Okay, as a legislator, you're allowed to do that. But at least you take that step back and you say, okay, let me go and look at the details. So I'm going to ask.
That's a compliment I've never heard put that way. That is incredible. Thank you. Thank you. I
Well,
am
you
known
are
as a good
incredible.
troublemaker, but yes, people, there's usually some truth behind what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a tough decision to do that, as opposed to just saying, okay, this is what I want and I'm going to run with it. You have to step back and you have to analyze. So what I'd like you to do for our
Yeah.
listeners is to please give us a little bit about you, your history, your family, the longevity. I know you went and got your master's degree, so throw it at us, and then we'll get into the straight talk.
Okay. Oh, where to begin? So I think the sentence that sums it up the best is I grew up in my Indian American father and Jewish American mother's Irish pub that they ran in Los Angeles. If if anybody wonders sort of where I built my backbone, I grew up in a bar. And I think it was just an incredible way to learn how to give back to the community. I mean, we small businesses hold our communities together in many ways, but also, see the different personalities of people who came in and know that everybody has a really interesting story to tell and something that gets them up in the morning and keeps them up at night. And you want to know that to do your best work. Right when I was running for the legislature, I was a senior at the University of Vermont. I was the student body president, and a neighbor said, okay, so let me get this straight. You grew up in Hollywood and you moved here to Vermont and you want to stay and you want to be our state representative. You sound crazy enough to be a Vermonter. You have my vote. I never felt like I was completely cast as an outsider or a flatlander. People said, if you have something to contribute, go ahead, show us what you've got. And so, as you know, Linda Joy, I started my legislative career at 22 in the House. I served there for 8 years. I served on a lot of different committees that now I, may serve on the counterpart in the Senate. So I feel like I've seen a lot of the how we work and what decisions we've made and what we should remember we committed to in the past. Going into my 14th year, this is my 14th year in the legislature. So took a break, got my master's degree at the Kennedy School of Government, focused a lot on rural healthcare, in fact, and substance use issues. So traveled to West Virginia and Kentucky, and even Portugal to see how are we helping people deal with despair and suffering in our medical system, or how are we not helping? I have 2 kids. You might hear one or 2 at some point. I came back. I ran for the Senate. I got married. So now I'm going into my 6th year in the Senate as the majority leader, and I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I think you can hear them a little bit. And I've started to feel just incredibly privileged to be able to make a difference and be home for bedtime.
Wow. Well, you've done some great things and you've got a lot ahead of you, especially right now. You're going into a complex time. It's the last year of the session.
Yeah,
So you've got political pressures because whatever you all decide, you have to remember it has to stay within your realm, not
yes,
being passed forward to future
that's right.
legislators.
Right.
So you've got a lot of guardrails out
Yeah,
there, a
as we
lot of
should.
deadlines. Yeah, right. That's exactly right. There should be that balance, but you also sometimes when you make decisions, you need to have longevity because it doesn't just happen in 3 months. So, you have those constraints. But
Exactly.
you actually have, I believe, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. You just heard from the administration. I think they did some testimony on TIF and CHIP, right? Oh,
Having
hi.
my 1-year-old say hi. This is Wesley.
Hi
Hi.
there. Aren't you precious? Okay, so our future leader has now
Yeah.
come and stolen the limelight from you.
Right.
Hi.
Right.
I
We,
love it.
I try to think about election season and then 18 years from now, what will his life look like?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you start making those signs, right? So cute. So, wasn't the administration in there testifying before your committee about Chip and Tiff?
We have much more, I think, to hear about.
Yeah.
And I've been, for Chip and Tiff, oh, Bug, hi. I sort of took him and now
Well, let him stay up
have him.
here.
I have him.
Totally keep everybody focused on
Yeah.
there
Um,
you go.
so they spent the last 6 months in the administration starting to write the guidelines and trying to be pretty true to what we asked for in the legislature. And I think that leaves us with some political decision making to do to ensure the program actually works. And so for those who don't follow along so regularly, we want to put $2 billion into infrastructure. And I say to my constituents, it's akin to knowing that if you have a house, you have to borrow to fix your roof and you have to lay, a new foundation every once in a while. And so this does make sense through the education, finance, property tax system. Um, um, and it will return more money to property taxpayers than it will part with. But we have to make sure it's serving the public good, but also that it's
Right.
functional. That we've promised every town they could be eligible for these dollars, and so we can't make the program so hard to administer that not even Burlington can have the chip program.
Right. And it's new, and so it has no history. So it's pretty much like a pilot program, and it's going to be touch and go. So please use caution
Right.
as you go forward with it. And, while all towns and cities may become eligible, they still have to have their infrastructure in place. They need the longevity. They need to have the people who
Right.
are qualified to run the TIF or
Right.
CHIP, or
Exactly.
else the taxpayers are going to eat it at the end.
Right.
And
And the
so,
state should be helping those smaller communities. It
right,
shouldn't be you're fighting with, Glover or Newport or fighting with St. Albans or Burlington.
right.
And in fact, one of the things I said when we passed the bill, say hi. One of the things when we passed the bill, I said was if we try to open this up for every community, but we don't say, oh, not Chittenden County, they don't need it. Chittenden County has professionalized staff. They have a lot of infrastructure already. The projects will be bigger. They'll may take more money at the start, but they'll return their investment very quickly and on time. And that helps us take risk in the smaller communities and give them technical support. So, I think there's a way in which we can all be in this together and not make our towns fight over who's first in line. We
Right.
constructed the financial package so that half of our towns in the state could have chip. That's very different than the 17 now that have TIF. Um,
TIF, right. Yeah.
and it's for
Right.
infrastructure, and it will the public will own that infrastructure afterwards. So, you know, it's I think we tried to put guardrails on, but not be so prescriptive that smaller communities can't take advantage of it.
Right. They just need to be really vetted, and I'm sure that's where VEPSI comes in, so they will look as well. So there should be a lot of balance. The baby's fine. I mean, they would much rather see the baby
I
than
know,
you be.
right? I know. But now he's ready to have a diaper change, and my 2-year-old is wants to say hi. This is what happens on Mondays.
I love it though. I love it. So what, and now you're facing the education issue, right? Because we have a whole Act 73 and we have the whole task force.
Yeah.
I don't know if you even know, but will there be a change in who's on the task force? Will there be a task force anymore?
I mean, that's a great question. So I'm on Senate Economic Development and Senate Education. So I feel like, the right places to be to try and look big picture at how frankly our demographic challenges and our economic challenges are stymieing our systems that otherwise, tend to work well, but are losing population and losing students. We do have someone crawling in from a sneak attack. This is
All right.
this is my
Oh my goodness.
2-year-old, Mira.
Hello.
He
How
loves
are
it.
you?
Can you say how you're doing?
Hi. Oh, you know what? I'm doing fine now that you're here
Yeah.
because you are just so precious. How are you doing? More importantly, how are you?
How are you?
Think about
What do you think?
it.
Yeah.
Are you having a good morning?
Yeah. She's a late sleeper, so I don't want to insult other
Oh,
parents
okay.
out there, but she's
All right.
waking up.
Yeah, well, good. She's having fun though. That's all that counts, right?
Yeah.
She'll have fun looking at this after you get to play it back and she gets to see herself on
That's right.
TV.
That is right. Yeah, she's my state
Yeah,
house baby. She's the 31st senator. She really grew up there, and she enjoys
that's
the rhythm
right.
of the state house more than her brother.
That's right. So tell me more about the task force. Do you know if it's going to be the same task force? Will there be a task force? Will it be approached differently? How will you deal with this?
We love a good task force in Montpelier, and sometimes I think it's good to give them their natural end and really listen to what they offered. And the redistricting task force did just so much good listening, and it's all captured. I think people are low information right now, so it's hard that it's in appendices and it doesn't have a top line message. But I think the top line message is there are ways for us to regionalize services and to look at regional high schools in the future. Okay, you want that. That's fine. Um, but drawing arbitrary maps right now is not going to save us money. In fact, it's pretty expensive to merge districts, and AOE has asked for $4 million to be helpful in doing that, but they never contemplated giving the districts money to do that. And you're up in the kingdom. We started our Senate education hearings in Canaan, right? Canaan's been talking forever about what they would need to have a larger school district, and it's an interstate district with New Hampshire. That's their natural home. They share sports teams. They need the state's help with that. They don't need us to just tell them, here's a line on a map.
So, there's been from the administration a position that, well, the task force was given a charge and they didn't do their charge. And so, regardless of whether they did or they didn't do that,
Yeah,
the key here is how's it going to proceed? Right?
exactly.
How,
Yeah.
how, how are you going to look at it, and who will the task force retain their charge, or will it
Mm.
now just be within the legislature?
Well, I think it's gonna to be very specific. It's gonna go back to the broader legislature, though we just heard their presentation this week. So they're all there and they're experts in what they heard and what they know. Regardless, I advocated even last year that when we do redistricting of House and Senate seats, which is very different, maybe less consequential to some, one would say, than their school district lines. It's been a shared responsibility that do you want to go downstairs? Yeah. Okay, say bye.
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 That actually rests with our government operations committees, because their job is mapping and voting and what will governance look like. The education committee should be doing education policy right now. There are ways that we can be giving opportunities. Thank you so much. Just give me back my computer accessory here. That our current education system needs the support to better student outcomes while lowering costs. Literacy initiatives, shared services and supplies, special education, for example. We were just named #1 in the country. That's individual districts doing their work, not the Agency of Education's support. In fact, we don't have a director of special education right now at the Agency of Education. That person just left. So one of the, I hate that people here we're receiving a failing grade and yet you're paying so much money. We need to tackle healthcare as the biggest driver of education spending. We need to grow the grand list. I mean, you and I actually have both been part of a legislature that was able to reduce property tax
Juice for
rates
property taxes,
because
right.
we were growing the grand list. So I think what Vermonters are saying, because they always, want it both ways, and I get it, is we want lower property taxes and great schools. And I think, there are ways to keep our eyes on that shared vision without simply drawing lines on a map and deciding, from there, letting the chips fall from there. Our districts are very thoughtful about where they can find efficiencies, where they can consolidate, and where they need state help to do that. And so I think that we should look at some non-voluntary matters. Where do you have to share resources? Where do you have to find those administrative efficiencies? Where do you have non-operating districts that need to be part of bonding decisions rather than just sort of sending tuition to another community? But Vermonters don't want us to lose what's really good about their community, which is often their elementary school, is something that we don't need to make more efficient. We just need to create excellent regional high schools and probably I'm realizing now I need to plug my computer in. This is the life of a mother on a Monday morning. Okay, we'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm gonna go off video just so it's not distracting. It will take me 2 seconds.
I will wait. We are speaking with the senator who is bringing us up to date on what is before her and the legislature right now in their second year of this term. And so we have already spoken a bit about presentations on CHIF and on TIF. And we are now looking at the task force on the educational system. The senator has informed us that it will also be before the government operations committees. And so it is far more than just here was a charge. So the senator has brought us up to speed on where they're at. And so I'm going to throw it right back to you.
Yeah, there was just a lot of really rich material from the task force without simply giving us maps that are going to cause everyone to feel backed into a corner. So I think the question on the table for us is, what is our North Star? Where are we? What are we driving at? Where are we steering the ship? Frankly, without, being held hostage by a governor who says maps or else you're not going home. There are a lot of ways to help Vermonters look at where we can find cost savings and create a better system for our kids. But lines on a page are not going to achieve that.
So for many years in my life's career, whenever you want to find something out, I personally, and I know other professionals, would always go to the educational system, the legal system, and the health care system.
Yes.
And that's
Right.
where you find out how something is really working, because that determines how your workforce and your economic development actually proceed.
Right.
So you can't just look at one little area and say, okay, if we use this saying and we all kumbaya together, it's going to be really good. And if we get the press to tell our story that way,
Right.
you know, and so you are depoliticizing it and
Oh,
going to
yeah.
jump in and get down and dirty,
Yeah.
because at this stage you need to get down and dirty,
Right. Right.
and figure it
And
out.
and it's variations on a theme, but every school district needs something a little bit different, right? I mean, I'll go back to Canaan, an incredible pre-K through 12 on one campus. They can't get more, efficient in many ways than that. Um, you know, they have a long drive on any side in Vermont to get anywhere else. And yet we should lament that in our current system, they had to cut their CTE programs, their career technical programs for health sciences and for building trades. What are the two things we need the most, and particularly in our rural places? Those career technical
Two things,
opportunities. Our
right?
current system is cutting out all of the things that make kids come alive, and it's, being eaten up by healthcare and by just growing fixed costs. So I keep trying to redirect our committee and others. What are the problems we're trying to solve? Because the districts would love help solving problems. What they don't need is for us to say this is the silver bullet, and it has nothing to do with what they need and what they are asking for. That means we haven't done our best listening, and instead, we're, like you said, I mean, I just try to go in with the evidence, and just drawing new lines around the state will not save us money.
And that's, you're right, because that's what I was talking about with the way you approach things, is that you're actually going to go in there and say, we need a solution, and not have a predetermined solution. You're going to look at the evidence and you're going to say, okay, this is who we need to work with. This is what we need to bring in. This is what we need to analyze. And we need, expertise here. And you really need to crunch some numbers, and you need to take good testimony and not just selective testimony.
Yes, and the reason I love doing that work in Vermont is because Vermont voters are very informed and engaged, and they want to study those numbers right alongside us. I mean, actually being in Senate education, it's one of the areas of jurisdiction that I had never served on that committee before, right? I've been on Ways and Means in the House and Senate Finance, and I left Senate Finance to go to Senate Education to say, you know, what are we missing? Why is every other committee doing education policy around us? While we struggle with how to improve our systems. And what I found is educators and stakeholders across the state, they watch our committee all the time. They have data ready to share with us. They are paying attention. It mirrors what's great, excellent about our schools. Is these are people who do their homework. And so we better do our homework too. They are trying to do what's best for kids, and they're doing it, for relatively little money per student. I mean, that's the other thing we need to talk about is, no one's saying that they're spending too much on teachers, or that we're, you know, um, if our average is $17,000 a student, that may be higher than most other states except for our rural counterparts. But caring for infants costs more than that. Our college system certainly costs more than that. So, we are still giving kids mental health supports, meals to eat, family supports, and educating them in their basic literacy, math, etc., for for a good price for a rural state. People are upset because there are fewer students,
Right.
and they're feeling it in their healthcare costs because there are fewer healthcare ratepayers. There are fewer Vermonters in a lot of places than in the past. You look at work of Kevin Chu, for example, from the Vermont Futures Project, and he can tell you that if every community was at its peak population, then we'd have 800,000 Vermonters. And a lot of rural America is struggling with the disinvestment of the federal government, and now fewer, lower population, and aging infrastructure. So, to me, the thing is, it always comes back to the economics and demographics of our state. And most communities are saying, so you won't let us have more housing. You don't want us to have a rural hospital. You're telling us we have to shrink, but then we have to still pay for the infrastructure and overhead of a town or a city or a state. And they can't keep doing that if we don't give them the tools to grow and thrive.
Yeah, and you're dealing with that whole sandwich generation. You've got the babies on side, you've got the older population on the other, and both are diminishing. And
Yes.
then smack in the middle, you have the affordable housing issue.
Right.
So everything is kind of going into that whole cliff, the infamous
Exactly.
benefits, everything that's going there. And so it's been there, and the effects of all these years
Right.
is what you have to deal with. And at a time where there's a lot of federal monies not being
Yes.
pulled back, you have a
Yes.
mess.
We do have a mess when you put it that way. We there's just there's no runway left to kick our problems down the road. There's
Right.
just there's nowhere left to go. And I think every generation is recognizing that right now. If I look at our housing problem, it's in many ways the supply and the market being very mismatched from people's needs and what choices and agency they need to have in the system. So you know while we need more affordable housing for families, the way we're going to get that is providing more senior housing and assisted supportive housing for folks to be able to leave their single family home that they can no longer heat and take care of and maintain, but they don't have another choice that allows them to stay close to their community, right? They don't want to move to a high rise in Burlington. Maybe some do, sounds kind of nice,
Right.
but many people want to stay close to their kids and their grandkids. And
Right.
they need that type of housing to be able to give a family their single family home. Um,
You also have an issue that I have seen is where people inherit larger homes from their
yeah,
families because, it's like, hey, I have this house, I want to leave it to my kids. They can't
right.
afford it.
That's right. And that house maybe used to be a homestead for 3 or 4 generations.
And now it's a
And
second home.
exactly, if that family can't afford to keep it, that becomes a second home. And people don't often appreciate we have the highest rate of second home ownership in the country. Over 20% of
Mhm.
our housing stock is non-primary residences. And sure, they often help pay for services that they don't enjoy year round necessarily, but those are also homes that used to house many kids and multiple generations of a family. And if they're not there, um, we lose something, and we lose something in certain communities that where that second homeownership rate is very high, and is squeezing out a lot of permanent
And those
residents.
homes come with a lot of costs and repairs because sometimes you get the infamous home and it's just not been kept up,
That's
or
right.
it's due for that new boiler, or it's due for that new
Yes.
roof. And where are they
Yeah.
going to get the money for this?
Exactly. And we love to see, an old historic home brought back to life, but what's invisible maybe to us is that that person might be paying top dollar for our very few tradespeople who, then are getting, I mean, of course, that's the market, and I can understand you want a steady project that pays you very well rather than taking on all these little home improvement projects for permanent residents. But that is a factor that we can't ignore. Our trades, I'm bullish on career technical education in all of this. I don't want it to get lost, right? Because I wouldn't say our school system is failing our kids, but I would say that overall our system is failing to produce the tradespeople and the workforce that we so desperately need and that kids want to be part of. I go around the state talking to young people who say, I'm 16 and I have 3 job offers to join different electrical businesses. Let me go. Let me become an electrical apprentice at 16 so I can be a journeyman by the time I'm 21. That's, you know, Many of our students are not saying, I don't like my school, or I'm not getting what I need. They're just saying, um, let me thrive in the trades and in different skilled areas. Let me be a nurse by the time I'm 18. And our system should absolutely support that, not make it harder. And right now, our system puts a lot of barriers in their way.
Well, I think they see the opportunities, and please, jump in if you disagree, the opportunities as their missed opportunities
Yes.
for them. And that I know when I went to school, they always had that, and I was from New York, they always had that cooperative program where you could do both.
Yes.
And so those who wanted to get into the trades would continue their academic, but they were also allowed to do this, what was called the commercial opportunities.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
so, and they were younger. I mean, you were in high school
Right.
and they
Exactly.
offered you both. And
Exactly.
so, and I would say now, I believe that the generation of our student population is more advanced reasoning wise and mentally than years ago because they have so many opportunities out there
They
with,
have a lot of access to
yeah.
information.
Oh my goodness, they're brilliant. They scare me. And so the key there is their opportunities should be offered to them when they're a bit younger.
Yes.
So that I think is something that needs to be focused on, even
Yes.
when you're doing the redistricting and you're doing everything with schools. How do you get these opportunities across the state
Yes.
so that it's not, well, if you want to be tech ed, you must live in Brattleboro, or
Exactly.
if you, and so it's a blend. How do you get
Exactly.
that? And it's a difficult thing geographically,
Right. Right.
and in the state of Vermont. So, as I said, I don't think that you can't figure it out. I
Right.
just think that there needs to be a really good, logical, strategic plan.
Yes, you are not wrong about any of that. I said I serve on economic development and education, and this is one of those intersection points that sometimes gets lost if we're siloed. The workforce is screaming out for workers. We're Some of our kids need alternative programs and are crying out for that access. And without trying to get too wonky, um, we have a lot of different models that for career technical education that grew out of necessity, geography, personality,
Right.
money went somewhere here or there. And I think what I see is us needing to narrow it down to 2 models that every student should have access to. Number 1, potentially a comprehensive CTE. So that's more like your St. John's Berry Academies, your Linden Institutes, where you can dabble. You can be that middle or high school student and say, I'd like to try out, auto body class. I'd like to try out a health sciences class. In many of our communities, they might, Rutland, they share a hallway with Stafford, which is an incredible program, but you have to commit to 4 years to be part of the program. And there's a wait list, right? Like, so kids want this excellent career technical education, but if they had behavioral problems in middle school, they might
Yeah,
be
they're
be
eliminated.
low on the list. I mean, we shouldn't be doing that in our education system. And so we need, I think, another model that is, you let those kids go from their conventional district setting after the age of 16. And I think Senator Clarkson said to me, "What do you mean let those kids go? That doesn't sound good." And I don't mean like we cut them loose, which is
No,
kind of how we feel right
freedom,
now.
freedom.
Yeah, we say which of your educators know you best, and it's your career technical educators. So do your math, do your science through everything you're learning, do your English through the international electrical code. Like that should count. And the problem is our districts will want to keep the money for that student if they're responsible for their graduation
Yep,
requirement.
that's right. That's right. And you have to remember too, what you don't want to do is rob these students of their dreams.
That's right.
I mean,
We have to
you grow
remember
up,
that.
you might want to be a film producer. Good.
Right.
Don't
Right.
take that away.
And
You know,
right now, we harm their dreams by saying you failed in our system because you're not going on to get a 4-year degree. So 40% of our students are going to go on to get a higher degree. What Oregon, for example, has started to say out loud as they steer their career technical programming is that 40% of our students are going to go on to get another degree. 40% are going to go on to get more certification and technical training as they go. And 20% don't need a single more day in a single another day in a classroom to start their lives and their careers. It's a 40-40-20 model. It's just saying our kids are doing really well in high school. They're not going on in high numbers to get a higher education. That's okay. The pandemic kind of showed them you don't really need to spend all that money on college to, be successful. Colleges kind of have to make their own case now that they're needed, and not a certification program, not a single, not workforce training, like going from being an LNA, to when you're 18 into a system that will give you the experience you need to be a great resident nurse at some point.
and I think that people misunderstand the fact that when you say there's this, technical training opportunity, it's not saying don't go to college.
Exactly.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
people,
Yeah,
I have seen, we've seen it, all of us,
right,
some people go later on in life.
right.
Everybody used to go to Europe after you got out of high school, then come back and say, I'm going to
Yeah,
go to school now.
right.
So the timing
Yeah,
is a choice, an
yeah,
individual's choice, and they should not be robbed of that golden opportunity to do all of it.
absolutely. I think I can speak with some authority that, at the age I am, I was part of that generation that was told, I was like on the early end of you have to go to college, you have to apply to 14 different schools, you have to go right after high school because you'll be considered, they will wonder what you were doing and why you didn't go straight here. And then you should get your master's degree soon after that. And the more years you spend in education, in higher education, the more earning potential you have. Well, they're starting to question some of those assumptions, especially that probably the years in school does help you with greater earning potential, but those years in school can be your preschool, right? So like for many people, they're better off with early years in school than catching up at the end and trying to figure out what they want to do and who they want to be. Um, we you know we made some really big assumptions and we pushed kids and pressured kids to live under those assumptions of what success should look like. And um, we do need to start rethinking that and having our policies um, use language that doesn't make kids feel like they're a failure because they're not part of some magical statistic about our kids are going on to higher education.
And I don't think that people are really grasping the fact that we're not talking about somebody who's determined to be an attorney. We
Sure.
know you need to
Right.
go
Right.
and get that education, and we meet the requirements for that licensure and the regulation. We
Yes.
know a CPA needs that. We know an engineer needs that. That's not what we're talking about. But it doesn't mean you can't go back and be the attorney at age 40. Or,
Right.
so you can do it all. The
Yes.
key is you have to get it under wraps and has to be sensible, it has to be affordable, and there has to be an opportunity, and you should never have the fear of
Right.
not being allowed
Right.
to
And
do
let's
what
bring
you
in,
want.
this is a great wonky conversation. This is why I love talking to you, Linda Joy. Like, when I finally got my master's degree and studied under Jason Furman, who was Obama's chief
Sure.
economic advisor, one of my favorite professors at the Kennedy School, um, we looked at, people would be fascinated to look at the pay scale, for example, of bank tellers over the last 100 years, because it's the story of when technology disrupts an industry and it goes from being high paid to very low paid. And then the society evolves and it goes back to being high paid. And then something else, it's actually one of the jobs that's been the most subject to societal and technological forces in its pay scale. So it's changed its status and its compensation over time. We and that was technology like an ATM, or technology before that, like computing
Sure.
power, that was non-human. So technology isn't an automatic threat to every job, and it's not a permanent threat to every job. It's how you weave in, that nimbleness and that humanity into what you do, and into how your position is successful. And we need to teach kids those skills, and we need to remember that we kind of had a societal moment where we were really down on the trades. And now those are the highest paying jobs out there, and they cannot be replaced with artificial intelligence anytime soon. And in fact, we need more people in the trades who can work with, new skilled machinery and who are machinists in the highest order. And they are going to be very high paid and very in demand. And our kids want that hands-on learning, and they want the spaces to get that. And there should be no wait lists. There should be no rejections from that system. That's not good for our state's economy, and it's not good for our kids.
It's not good for the mental health of anybody who wants to advance and
Yeah,
anybody going forward, okay, who really says, okay, this is my life now. Don't stifle their ability to be
exactly.
creative and
Exactly.
access the resources. So
One of
I
the if I
want
could just
you,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry, I
ahead.
wanna put a fine point on that, which is one of the
Sure.
statistics we really talk what I love data, and this is more of narrative data, it's like qualitative in a way, but if a student doesn't feel like they have a plan for their future by 7th grade, we lose them. That's when we lose them, right? So if you're not building your literacy by 3rd grade, we know that's an inflection point. 7th grade is when a student has to feel like they have a dream. It can change, but they have to feel
Sure.
like they're driving at something, or we start to lose them. And when do these CTE programs start? Usually not till 10th grade.
10th
So,
grade.
it really speaks to we have to help them build a dream and protect it from a very young age.
I agree with you 100% on that. Needs to be brought in at a younger age. The opportunity, the understanding that it's there. You don't have to make a choice, but you
Exactly.
need to know that there is an opportunity. And opportunities are what make your plans work
And
because
exposure.
right,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I want you to
Yeah.
tell our listeners now, because I want to give you the time. This is your show today.
Yes.
What do you want to talk about?
Ooh. Well, the good and bad news is I steer toward housing
Yeah.
and economic issues just no matter what. So my three big priorities this session are housing as usual, um, career technical education, because I think it's almost the other half of the economic equation to housing. I see very little else that that we can do to remobilize our economy, right? A lot of people just saw a study that says we're almost last in economic
I
mobilization.
saw that.
Yeah, and I keep trying to tell people, with our K-shaped economy, with young people not being able to afford a house or a future, we're getting ourselves into a downward spiral here. And I think the two answers there remain housing and career technical education. If you ask me what my third focus is going to be, it's not one that I would have chosen, but it's one that I looked around at what was happening, and I realized that the data is showing us that we need to create a coherent cannabis market. Um, and and I say that because, number one, I think the federal administration is looking to deschedule cannabis, right? And so, when I've always been on the economic development committee, and I chaired the economic development committee, when we had to say we we need to create a coherent market that favors our local craft industry, right? And so we've done that with beer and wine and spirits, even if we, wanted to be careful about addiction and making sure we don't, we pay attention to those metrics. Um, we in every rural pocket of the state, you see jobs being created and cultivation happening and farms being revitalized to produce high quality cannabis products. And meanwhile, you have a federal administration that is cozying up to international cannabis companies like Curaleaf out of Canada. They've been huge donors to the Trump administration, and more mass-produced cannabis products out of Ohio, right, where the vice president is from, and where some of the Trump family members are on the boards of some of those cannabis companies. So Vermont once again needs to um, throw its, to punch above its weight and help its craft producers maintain quality and have a place in the national market um, when we deschedule cannabis. And you see it all over the state, right? You can go to Hyde Park or South Hero or anywhere and see um, our craft beer and our craft cannabis industries cooperating and revitalizing communities. And so I have a bill um, that's more comprehensive than we've been doing lately to really bolster our craft cannabis industry.
I'm interested to read that bill. Yeah, I did public audits, and I did public audits of the very first cannabis companies.
Wow. Yeah.
And so very familiar with all of this, and I would very much like to read that bill. So if you'll send me that bill,
Yes.
I would like to see where you're going with that.
Yeah, and despite a lot of forces against them, our craft cannabis producers are bringing 60-70 million dollars of revenue, tax revenue into the state. They are overperforming, from what we forecasted. They are successful, and they're employing people with good wages, and they're in our rural places. So, you know, I always want us to be careful, but not so careful that we take decades to modernize and support an industry like we did with spirits. And despite, a lot of challenges and incoherence for spirits and others, we have nationally and internationally recognized, um, you know, spirits and beer and wine brands in Vermont, and um, we have to remember what we're good at as a rural state, and our brand really matters a lot. And I don't think we moved too quickly. We didn't commercialize our markets too quickly, but now we have something special, and we need to cultivate it and support it.
Yeah, and what you brought up, public safety doesn't necessarily mean a deterrent to
Right.
the growth of a business. It
Exactly.
goes hand in hand, and
Exactly.
it shouldn't be either or.
Right.
And so you're going to have to look at the history, you're going to have to look at the numbers, you're going to have to look at, there's always going to be those who have their own personalized issues with addiction, et cetera,
Right.
and you're going to have to look at resources there and what the numbers
Absolutely.
are. I mean, that's the same with the gaming industry, right?
Yes.
I
Oof.
mean, you're going to find it all over the world.
Yeah.
And so you really have to look at it from the business standpoint as well as from the health of the individual to
Right.
the actual economic development and the workforce development. So, but those are the elements that you look at, hopefully, on every opportunity of building business.
Exactly.
That's what
Exactly.
an economic development is. It's
Right.
not one or the other.
Right. And
And
it's people when they pay their taxes, they want those dollars to go toward solving problems. So I've always said, like, if we used our tobacco tax money to actually prevent tobacco use and support cessation, that'd be great. We use very little of that money to actually support people who do have addiction. So, it's always, I think Vermonters are very smart about saying, I want to pay my fair share. I want to be, contributing to a functioning government and a functioning society. Don't
bingo.
waste my money.
You just hit it, a functioning society
Yeah,
and what their definition of functioning is, and that
right.
comes from the legislature kind of
Yeah,
helping to define
that's
what
right.
is functioning. Do you believe you'll have support, or is it too early to tell?
I think the specter of the federal government, you know, making this decision for us is getting people to move more quickly than they have before. And frankly, I've been on the House side when I voted against moving too quickly with cannabis,
I
um,
remember.
with the cannabis market. I'm in the Senate now, where we I think we are more market focused. So, the Cannabis Control Board has never gotten to make their case in the Senate first in a long time. It's been the House, and the House wanted to put a moratorium on cannabis retail establishments, and instead, I've looked at it and said, well, the problem is we're just saying to a community, you have to take it whole cloth. Once you let cannabis in, you have no control. We don't do that with alcohol. We say you can have a certain number of licenses, you can manage time, place, and manner. We need to let cannabis look a lot more like alcohol. And so I think we have some room to make it work.
This is kind of a more personalized question. Have you found that since you went for your master's degree, your thinking in the business world has been expanded in the way you analyze?
My other favorite professor, David Deming, he taught about economics and education, so educational inequality and years in school and how that gives a community and an individual access to success. He's now the dean of Harvard College. And I still read, his articles about most people are using AI and ChatGPT for like recipes and travel itineraries, just like they used Google searches for very benign things. It was I learned how to understand the data and not be too reactionary. So your compliment, goes right to some of my master's professors in healthcare economics and education economics and just economics in general, that you really, there is a rigor and a science to the cost of living. There is real data behind how you make people's quality of life better. Don't just go for the shiny object. And you know that well. You sort of always tried to tell people that.
That's right. That's right. Right. Read.
Exactly.
Read.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
remember when was in college, and I remember, you raise your hand, oh, can I have the reading list? And I remember my professor, the very first one, said, if it's written, you read it.
Exactly.
As I
Right.
sat down quietly in my seat,
Yeah.
I went, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
what am I doing?
Yeah. We've
But it's
lost that
true.
a little bit in the
Yeah.
legislature. Like we always could count on a few people that had read everything, had read all the reports. We all need to do the
Right.
homework.
Yeah, and that's good. So, are you finding all of these issues and the need for discussion? Are you leery that the Senate and House may be too conflicting, or do you think that there'll be a better working relationship?
I mean, that's always a question on our minds is how can we work better together? And right now, Vermonters, like they want their lower property taxes and their great schools, they want to see coherence and shared vision, but they also don't want groupthink. They want people to be able to stand up within their own party or within this operating system and say this isn't working. We saw that in the New Jersey and Virginia governor's race, is that you had two very strong women who were laser focused on cost of living, who said, I will fight with my own party if that's what it takes, to help lower people's costs. So, again, I go back to the data because the data is showing that Vermont has a really high cost of living, and that you can go to websites like the Economic Policy Institute's Family Budget Calculator, and you can look at your county and say, for a family of two adults, two children, here are the costs that are too high. And so I internally encourage House, Senate, Democrats, Republicans, governor's administration to stay laser focused on people's cost of living and how we are returning to the problems we're trying to solve and make sure we're solving them with our policy
And
before we
stay
get
focused, right?
exactly.
You hit it, because if you start to go off down those rabbit holes,
Yeah.
you lose it.
And
And
you're
that's
focused on
yeah.
my bill, and it's like,
Mhm.
but is your bill solving the problem? Do we need to just for example, again, to be maybe too wonky, we're talking about healthcare. We fought really hard, and I was there to say we need a statewide healthcare teachers contract. That's going to solve all our problems. That statewide teacher healthcare contract has our hands tied to 50% cost growth over the last 5 years. I'm willing to say maybe we were wrong. We certainly need to look at this again and see, did we solve a problem there or did we create a new one? Um, and we have to be willing to do that. If even if we were here to say, you know what, we jumped at a solution and it didn't solve the problem.
Touche.
Let's
Good for you. And that's why I was saying you are a senator who reflects. You are a senator who steps back, and as you become more educated in areas and you become more knowledgeable in areas, you see things differently and you say, "Let me go recalculate. Let me go and focus." And I applaud you for that,
thank
because that is something that is rare,
you. Sure.
something that is not so popular. And, oh, well, too
Yeah.
bad, because you
Yeah.
need to do it. And
Right.
so we've got like 1 minute left. It's all yours, Senator. We are here with, Senator Kesha Hinsdale. And what would you like to say to our audience?
Well, I mean, so I'm the Senate Majority Leader. So I'll just, you often don't hear Democratic Senate Majority Leaders say Democrats need to get their act together. But I think Vermonters are very savvy voters, and I listen, when they give us a message, and they gave us a message in 2024 that you have to use your majority for good. You can't use it to stifle dissenting voices. You can't use it to ignore common sense. And I want to say we heard you loud and clear. We heard Vermonters that we need to preserve what's good. We need to protect our rural communities. They're great hotbeds of interesting experimentation and of living life on a scale that we need to remember matters to a lot of folks, while we work to bring down the cost of living in Vermont, which is just scientifically, numerically too high for people to afford right now. So I hear you. You'll see that in not only how we try to communicate with Vermonters and run our campaigns, but in the kinds of candidates that they'll see, where we lost ground. We lost ground in places that went further toward the Trump administration and and toward the Republican side of the equation because they really felt like we weren't listening. And they haven't seen their incomes recover since potentially the Great Recession. So they're saying to us, you have to hear us. And, it's not optional. We can't wait till next election to solve these problems. We hear you, and we are laser focused on cost of living and solving Vermonters' real problems.
Well, thank you, Senator. You have a lot of work ahead of you, but I think you're going to get the rest of the legislature back on the path, okay? Stay focused, and I will see you up at the State House.
Yes. Yeah.
And I will look forward to having you back on the show. So this
Yay.
has been Straight Talk Vermont with Linda Joy Sullivan, where we get it straight.